Hi, everybody. My name is Greg Katz, and welcome to WeAreSC.com's Inside the Trojans Huddle, where we tell it like it is. Friends, Inside the Trojans Huddle is a game-like panel discussion with WeAreSC columnists, staff writers, historians, and editorial board. We first start with the pregame show, where we introduce our panel members for this edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, and then give you the latest USC Trojans football news. First, let's meet this week's panelists. Marc Kulkin, WeAreSC columnist who writes the Monday Morass, Yay or Nay, and Sunday Takeaways, in addition to regular season football and basketball practice reports. Chris Arledge, former William Jewell College defensive back and team captain, and WeAreSC columnist who writes the popular column Musings with Arledge and is a graduate of the USC Law School. And Greg Katz, that's me, your moderator and producer of Inside the Trojans Huddle, and a weekly WeAreSC columnist who writes the obvious and the not so obvious IMHO Sunday, and an active member of the Football Writers Association of America. Now, before we kick off this edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle, here's the latest USC football news as of Tuesday's taping. The USC Trojans continue their first full week of practice, now in pads, no reported injuries of the major variety, and after Monday night's Coliseum practice, the Trojans took Tuesday off. The Cardinal and Gold are scheduled to resume practice Wednesday morning, again in the Coliseum, marking the fourth consecutive practice day in the Trojans' legendary sports venue. After Wednesday's Collie practice, the balance of the week's practices will be on campus. After Monday night's Coliseum practice, head coach Lincoln Riley confirmed that Melbourne Australian punter Aiden Sleep Dalton has joined the team and will compete with Will Rose for the starting punter's position. Riley also said the tight end Jude Wolfe has a foot issue, but does not consider it a serious problem. And the 2022 preseason college football coaches poll was released on Monday, and the Trojans were ranked number 50 in the country. Of note, a number of upcoming Trojans opponents were also ranked, including number 5 Notre Dame, number 8 Utah, and number 12 Oregon. To no surprise, Alabama was ranked number 1. The Trojans received a big recruiting commit this past weekend when 4-star edge rusher Braylon Shelby of Friendswood, Texas, selected the Trojans over the in-state Texas Longhorns of Steve Sarkisian, and last week 3-star cornerback Maliki Crawford from Oxnard, California, Pacifica High, committed to the Trojans. Crawford chose the Trojans over UCLA and Cal. And also over the last weekend, former Trojans All-America offensive tackle Tony Vaselli was enshrined in the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton, Ohio. Tony is the 14th member Trojan to be enshrined in the hall, and his enshrinement makes USC number 1 of all colleges and universities represented in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Congrats again to Tony, who lives in Jacksonville, Florida. And the Trojans athletic department has officially hired highly respected former Big 12 Conference executive Ed Stewart to be USC's executive senior associate athletic director. Stewart's duties reportedly will include oversight of the football program. For your information, Stewart is a former captain of the 1994 Nebraska National Championship football team. And finally, friends, WeAreSC's Inside the Trojans Huddle greatly appreciates your viewer and listenership. And we encourage those of you watching on sites like YouTube to click on the red subscriber and like buttons. Greatly appreciated, and it is free. And we encourage you to check out WeAreSC.com and become a valued premium member of the best USC football and athletic news source around. All right. With the bell, it's time for the opening kickoff and our first quarter topic. Panel. If you count Wednesday morning's Coliseum practice, the Trojans will practice 4 straight days in their legendary home. Panel, after opening training camp on campus last Friday, what do you think is the significance of the Trojans practicing in the Coliseum 4 straight days? And is Lincoln Riley trying to send a message to his players and coaching staff? If so, what would that message be, in your opinion? We start off, as always, with our leadoff hitter, Marc Kulkin. What's the message?
This is your house. Don't get your butt kicked in it anymore. Look, all you got to do is go back and look at last year's scores. Even in the games that USC did win at the Coliseum, they still gave up over 30 points. And I never really understood why USC practiced more at Howard Jones as opposed to the Coliseum. I get it logistically, it's right there. Step out of the McKay Center, you've got about 25 yards, 30 yards to your practice facility. But practice where you play your games. You spend your off season running the stairs, getting familiar with the Coliseum, going through that whole mental process. The thing I think what Lincoln's saying, look, you're going to be playing your games here. Let's practice here. Let's defend your house. Get familiar with it. I think it might be more for Lincoln and the staff more than maybe the players. Maybe let's look at it from that direction.
Chris, what's the deal? Why is he doing 4 straight days? He starts off on a Friday, 7 o'clock in the morning, 2 straight days in the Coliseum. Press is not allowed to be in there. Monday night, they have a long practice, supposed to start at 6:30. They go at 6:45. They don't end until 9. But is there a message in practicing successive days in the Coliseum like this?
I don't know. I assume they're doing it because if you're more comfortable in a place, you'll probably play better there. And so he's probably just trying to get them more comfortable at the Coliseum. He's got a bunch of guys who've never played there, transfers. He's going to have some new kids that are going to get extensive playing time, and they've never played there. So I assume it's something like that. You do give up something when you practice at the Coliseum because you only have one field now. And there are times when it makes sense to have your specialists in one area, and you can have your offense doing 7-on-7 somewhere, be doing some sort of inside running drills on another field. I mean, having that extra space usually is useful for a football practice. So you do give something up when you go to the Coliseum, you lose that. But yeah, I assume that's why he's doing it, because he wants to get these guys used to playing in that facility so that it doesn't seem strange to them and they don't feel uncomfortable when they finally show up there.
Well, I think it goes deeper than that, guys. I think that it is a new team, basically, with a lot of changes, new coaching staff, of course. We have new players coming in with the transfers and the true freshmen and so on and so forth. But it goes deeper, and I'll tell you why I believe that. The Coliseum is a legendary place. I think that part of it is Lincoln Riley wanting to reinforce, not only is this our home, it's our legendary home. You are walking down a tunnel into the Coliseum that has been traditionally national champions, All-Americans, Heisman Trophy winners. When you play on this grass, it's not just like playing on a stadium grass. This is hallowed ground, and you need to know it, and you need to experience it. And when all these people are in the stands, this is what they're going to expect from you. So I think there is probably history being told to these players at one of these practices, because a lot of them have never been there before. The freshmen who only came in for training camp were not here in the spring. They're wide-eyed. Of course, they've been there on an official visit, but maybe not having, since they've been in spring ball. They're going to say, wow, I'm really practicing here. Now, one of the reasons that they don't practice in the Coliseum on a regular basis, even though I agree with both of you that when you look in context, it'd be nice to practice on the field you play on, is I think one of the points was well taken by Chris, was you don't have 2 practice fields. And also, if you really did practice every day, how much would you rip up that grass? That's at least my experience at the start of the season has always been pretty immaculate if you go down there. So maybe in a long-term sense, practicing there is a thrill. And you notice, and correct me if I'm wrong, they don't have any scheduled practices that I'm aware of in the Coliseum until the first game. So if that's accurate, that would mean that it won't have any abuse unless there's some sort of concert or some other activity down there. So that could be a reason. But I know this, there has never been a time that I have not gone onto that Coliseum floor, either in the spring or at the end of a game. The media is allowed the last 5 minutes onto the field, that it isn't exciting. It's always exciting. It is exhilarating to say, wow, I am on a field that has hosted so many big time events. So it was an interesting concept. It caught my eye. I think it caught a couple other people's eyes that you practice 4 straight days. Maybe they couldn't get the Coliseum later on, but we'll see.
Believe it or not, you actually have more space on the Coliseum grass, the grounds themselves, than you do at Howard Jones, Brian Kennedy. So I understand Chris's point and your point as well, Greg. You don't want to tear up the field, but as far as being able to have all the teams and different units have an equal amount of space to work, you actually have more room inside the Coliseum than you do at Howard Jones.
Point well taken. Point well taken. All right, guys, let's go to that second quarter. Training camp. We're going to take a look here at this physicality. Big issue. During the Clay Helton years, we've all heard way too many times under Helton how much the Trojans would be physical and how they'd be dominant, but it never happened. It was a true credibility gap. So on the opening day of training camp, first-year head coach Lincoln Riley said, it's a fist fight every day. You'll wake up and get ready to fight again. Well, after a recent Coliseum practice, Coach Riley told his team on the storied Coliseum grass that while daily execution of plays and assignment are important, they will be graded first and foremost after every practice by their fight, quote unquote, their fight, and they should evaluate themselves each practice on their fight. So panel, a 2-part question for you. First, what are your thoughts on Riley saying every day is a fist fight and each player will be graded on their fight? Is this just lip service, or do you think that physical football is finally returning USC to its storied championship roots? And second, what do you want to see and hope to get accomplished in the upcoming weeks of training camp? Chris, we'll start off with you.
Well, obviously, it's nice to hear that. Every football coach says that sort of thing. They may not use those words, but every coach talks about physicality. And as you pointed out, Clay Helton said it all the time. So just because a coach says it doesn't mean anything. You have to actually meet it, and you have to be committed to it. And I think it helps a little bit if the coach himself has a little toughness in him. Clay Helton is a soft human being. I'm sure he's a really nice guy, and he'll go up and give you a nice hug. He should be a kindergarten teacher or a 3rd grade PE teacher. He's not a football coach. He's not. And he allowed his teams get pushed around over and over and over again for years. And so when he would say that, just made you want to throw up. In fact, I'm starting to get worked up just thinking about it, Greg. I don't know why you made me angry already in the show.
Because I know it makes you want to throw up.
Yeah. So do I think that Lincoln Riley means it? I do, because I watch those Oklahoma teams play, and at the very least, up front offensively, those guys were big and tough, and they pushed people around. They ran the football. So, yeah, I think Lincoln Riley means it. I think that they will probably, I think you'll probably see a toughness at USC that you haven't seen since about 2009. And that's going to be, and that's going to be a welcome sight. But again, talk is just talk. So he's going to have to go out and have somebody actually punch somebody in the mouth and open up some holes on 3rd and 1 for the running backs. But I think we will. We better. If not, we're in trouble, guys. If they made all of these changes and they paid him all of that money, and USC still walks out there and plays soft and gets pushed around and can't convert a 3rd and 1, I don't even want to think about it.
Well, I'll tell you what, I know that Marc Kulkin thinks about it. What do you think, Marc? Now, Marc was at practice last night at the Coliseum. So, Marc, tell the good listeners and viewers, physicality, is it there? Do you see it at the start of practice? And do you think that Lincoln's credibility is not on the line because he's going to walk the walk? What say you?
Well, yeah, and first of all, it ended at 9:15 last night. So not only did they push it back, but it ended later. So it is lip service. And it's to Chris's point. Every coach talks this language. So until they prove it, and they can talk the talk, or they got to walk the walk. And we won't know until we see them play against Rice. Now, what we've seen in practice, it's definitely been more physical from what we've been able to see. Last night we got to talk to Bobby Haskins for the first time, the offensive tackle transfer from Virginia. His body was well marked up. You could see that he had worked that day, or the last few days. He had bruises on his arms. There were scratch marks. He looked like an offensive lineman. So yeah, again, to Chris's point, they have to be physical. There's no option this year, because without it, I have to endure another season in that press box of just sitting there like this, waiting for the game to end. And it's not fun.
Greg, I saw there was they have that show they were running on ESPN for the 150th anniversary of college football. And they had a bunch of different episodes. And one of them, there was an extended interview or multiple interviews with Urban Meyer. And he was talking about physicality in football. And he was talking about how what you're asking guys to do is a really unnatural thing. I mean, running full speed into another big human being that's also full speed and smashing your head into him and doing this over and over and over again. This is unnatural. And part of the problem that USC's had is if you have a bunch of coaches who are former quarterbacks and at least in, for example, Steve Sarkisian's case, care mostly about X's and O's. I can't say that about Clay Helton, not because Clay Helton doesn't care mostly about X's and O's, but because he doesn't even know that. But if that's what you have, and you don't have somebody who's really committed to forcing people to do something that's really hard and really painful and really unusual for people to do. If you don't know how to do that, people aren't going to do it. No. Yeah, there are the people who just naturally go out on a football field and sacrifice their body are few and far between. Most people have to learn that, and it takes a certain amount of commitment. And if you don't force that from your guys, then they're not going to show it. And so the question is whether Lincoln Riley and staff can force that. Can they make their guys do something that is highly unusual, to put themselves through pain, to do something that is going to hurt, because either because the goal is so great that you're willing to do it, or because you've conditioned yourself to actually enjoy it, which some people eventually do. Can he do that? I think he can, but I guarantee you that Nick Saban can. And when Urban Meyer was at Ohio State, I guarantee you that Urban Meyer could, and I know Pete Carroll could. And that's the thing that people always misunderstood about Pete Carroll's USC teams. They always talk about fast and flashy offenses and skill positions, but Pete Carroll's teams would punch you in the face, right? And they would do it to it didn't matter if it was Oklahoma in the national championship game, or if they're playing at Auburn, if they're playing the Farm Boys from Iowa and the Orange Bowl. I don't care who it was or what kind of reputation those teams had for toughness. Pete's teams would out-tough you. That's why USC was great under Pete Carroll. So we'll know in September and October whether Lincoln Riley really has that in him. I think he does, and I think he means it. But that more than anything is what's going to determine whether USC is a team that's going to win 9 or 10 games a year over the coming few years, or a team that's going to win 11 or 12. That's what's going to decide it.
Well, it's been my experience that when USC is good, they are physically tough. Now, you can get two types of players. And let me go back to a point you made, Chris, because I think it's a very good point. The type of mentality a coach is. SC's had a succession of former quarterbacks, okay? And it is shown, in my opinion, we want to pass the ball, we're finesse. It's refreshing to me that Lincoln Riley understands we got to be tough. Now, part of it is he's coming from a conference that, physicality is like a calling card, the Big 12. We a lot of Texas players coming up through the Texas high school system. Physicality is the name of the game. I have to tell you that I don't know why I did this, but I just had to go on YouTube and watch Clay Helton's address to a media day for his conference. And the first line that came out, I wish I could have edited it and run it on one of my columns. He says, our program is based on discipline and physicality. And I heard that. I got to tell you, I just started cracking up. And then he started in with everything that you heard before, but that first line said it all to me. Now, in terms of physicality, a lot of it, in my opinion, based on experience of the McKay years, of the Robinson years, of the Pete Carroll years, is you recruit the type of players that has that mentality already in them. Okay. Brad Buddy, who I know is a legendary a long time ago. This is a guy who was 18 years old and acted like an NFL player, and he would pancake you in a split second as a freshman. Sam Baker came in from Tustin High School. That was a man. Deuce Latui, that was a man. Now, I think that if you are surrounded by players like that, and you haven't been around players like that, they can bring out an attitude in you to play like that, because you go, well, look how they're playing. I mean, they're playing like they're crazy. Okay. And if you look at the linemen, SC was producing NFL linemen on all three of those eras. In fact, I'm writing on Sunday about players from out of state, and a lot of them were linemen. But I think you're born with it in a lot of ways, and it gets developed. But I will tell you this: if they don't know what physical play is going to be when they hit the Big Ten in 2024, they're going to find out what physical play looks like on both sides of the line of scrimmage, and they're going to have to up their game if they're not at that level going into the Big Ten. Mark, you wanted to say something. I'm sorry there.
Well, I was just going to say, Lincoln kind of touched on this yesterday after practice about, being aggressive and being physical. It's okay to have the penalties. If, people remember Pete Carroll's teams, they were kind of over penalized for being over aggressive, but you don't want to take that aggressiveness away from the team. So Greg, you were touching on, can you develop that kind of stuff? It's okay to be physical and play violent and to get penalized, but again, it's how you use it. To see Ray Mayaluga knocking a quarterback out at the sideline, a split second late, those type of plays are okay in the coach's mind. As far as fighting, the coaches are leading by example. Yesterday at practice, they didn't get on the bus or the golf carts from campus over to the Coliseum. They ran.
You're talking about the coaches now.
Yeah, the coaches. So that's one way of teaching the team how to fight, doing something that's difficult. I think one of you had mentioned that. A couple of the coaches, when they finally got there, they were hunched over, hands on the hips, gasping for air. And it's like, all right. They're showing the players like, hey, if I'm going to put myself through this, you're going to go ahead and we're going to put you through what we think you can do as well. So there's different ways to lead and to fight through everything, I guess, is what the original question is.
Okay, let's go to the second part of the question. And Chris, we'll start with you. What do you want to see and hope gets accomplished in the upcoming weeks of training camp? What do they need to accomplish?
Well, look, more than anything else, this program needed an attitude adjustment. The Clay Helton years, actually, that's not fair. I would start back even earlier than that, but through Sarkisian, through Clay Helton, it was a constant slow motion collapse into a team that wasn't tough and acted like they didn't give a damn. I mean, you watched the team play last year, against in the Coliseum against a team like Oregon State, and they're just getting beaten up on their home field by the Beavers. You watch that and you think, I don't think these guys even care. I'm not convinced more than 10 of them actually want to be out there. And then for the Cal game, I think it was about 10 that actually showed up. And so, look, the number one thing that had to happen with this program is there had to be an attitude adjustment. I think Lincoln Riley realized that. I mean, that's why we saw a lot of guys leave and we saw a lot of new guys come in. It's why he's talking about fist fights in practice. He understands that. If they don't fix the attitude, they can't be great. You can recruit a bunch of guys who are fast and athletic and can make plays. And Lincoln Riley's going to do that. I think we all know Lincoln Riley's going to be able to do that. And that can get you 9-3. It can get you 10-2. That can get you the sort of ceiling that Steve Sarkisian's teams will have at Texas, where they're going to have a bunch of talented guys, and they're going to have some days where everything works in the passing game and they score a lot of points, but they're not tough because Sarkisian's not tough and he doesn't know how to make his team tough. So if you want to be great, if you want to be Alabama, if you want to be able to beat Georgia in a playoff game, you got to be tough. That's the number one thing I want to see. I want to see a team that comes out and instead of just outrunning Rice because they're more athletic, just beats the tar out of Rice. I mean, just physically manhandles them and continues to do it to the whistle every play the entire game. That's what I want to see. If we see that, we have good things coming, not just years from now, but this year.
Mark, do you concur, or what's your perspective on it?
Yeah, of course, I concur with that. What I want to see in the last couple of weeks of camp, I want to see Coach Riley come out with his rotation. It doesn't have to be written in stone, but just say, look, this is my starting offensive line. Here's my starting defense. The competition is still open, but no more of this when you see the depth chart or between 3 or 4 names. Set the rotation. And I think that's one way of helping your team prepare to become more mentally strong as well. They know what they have to do physically to get it on the field. But if they're not constantly thinking, all right, well, maybe I'm starting this week, maybe I'm not. Get it out there, take charge. I won't say, I know Chris will say it. Clay Helton didn't seem like he was in charge of the program. It seemed like the tail was always wagging the dog. That's what it was like at practice. Rehab Island was always populated. It was great to see that first day of fall camp, 2 guys out there for legitimate reasons. Now, granted, it grew a little bit over the weekend, but Lincoln said, most of the guys are bumps and bruises. We'll see. We'll see who wants to fight and who can play through injuries or who can play through being hurt and who has legitimate injuries.
Well, I think in the coming weeks, it's going to play itself out. Who's going to be starting? Who's not going to be starting? I want to see the second unit. I want to see that develop. I want to know that they have a second unit, that they're too deep. But I'm going to also say I agree with Christopher, this idea that I want the Coliseum to be a house of pain. I want teams to, one of the great experiences I had is when we were covering for WeAreSC.com the game at Nebraska. And I remember the buses rolled into the parking lot and the Cornhusker fans were, they're there. I mean, they're everything you read about, they back their team. So SC's buses come in, and of course, it's the tradition. Mark, you know this. Chris, you know this. The players start rocking the bus, right? So, it's, if you haven't seen it, you're a fan of quote, what made it great was, of course, SC's at the pinnacle of the college football world now. So those buses start shaking back and forth and back and forth. And so it's like the Nebraska crowd steps towards the buses, right? The bus doors open up. Who's the first guy that walks out? Ray Malaluga. I want to tell you, there was a hush. And then behind him comes some of the other guys, Sam Baker with the full beard and the whole deal. I thought Nebraska, from a fan standpoint, I think they were intimidated as soon as they saw that. And the good news is when they went on the field, and I remember being on the field before the game, the fans were really in it, but SC just ground them up and spit them out, and they lived up to it. Right now, the players that are new, it's a new team basically. And Chris made a good point. If you want to be like Alabama, you got to play like Alabama. And the good news is they have somebody from Alabama in Shane Lee. He knows exactly what physicality and where they should be. And some of the others that from the Southeast Conference know it. So you do have guys coming from other programs that
know what physicality, but I think it all starts physically. And what I want to see in the coming weeks is that they can take that physicality, that culture, and transfer it against Rice. Agree with Chris totally. Beat the living daylights out of them. To me, if they win 45-0 or they win 30-0, I want to see a Rice team limping back up the tunnel. And I want to see that mindset for the next game and then the next game. Because I'm going to just tell you something. They're going to get measured in the second half of the season when they open up at Utah. They're going to get measured when they face Notre Dame. And I know people are saying, oh, Notre Dame has a kid out of San Diego. You know, he's only runs the ball. Notre Dame's offensive line is basically intact for the most part. And they are physical and they're brutal. And that's going to be the measuring stick until they get into some sort of playoff or big bowl game. And what we're seeing now in development in practice, that's got to reach a crescendo of physicality. Otherwise, we're going to see what we've seen in the past. And I don't think Lincoln Riley will stand for it. I think he'll change people as soon as they think there's no fight in them. And I expect that there's going to be fight in them. So let's get to halftime. Something a little bit, interesting, I think. We're all college football fans. We all watch games on TV. So panel, in your lifetime, who is the greatest college football play-by-play television broadcaster? And who would you rank second as a broadcaster that you've ever heard of? Mark, who did you look forward to listening to?
Well, if either of you give an answer other than Keith Jackson, we're done being friends forever.
You promise?
Yes, that's not a threat. No, Keith Jackson is obviously the godfather of college football as far as announcing goes for me. And then the Cardinal and Gold glasses go on. I only know Tom Kelly and Pete Arbogast. So that was an easy 1, 2, 3.
Well, I see your point. The question is television. Is there someone behind Keith Jackson who you say, yeah,
well, Tom Kelly did TV. He was on.
Yes, he did.
So if I have to come up with another one after that.
Yeah.
I'll go with the guys from CBS. That early Vern Lundquist and what was it, Gary Danielson, that duo together. I'll make them one.
Well, I think that's informal. Let me ask you something, Mark. What was it that you liked about Keith Jackson? What was it that made him number one in your heart?
Probably for you, it would be similar for you. And I still get choked up when I have to talk about Vin Scully, but Keith Jackson just had that voice. It was just so natural. It flowed. He knew when to talk, when not to, when to let the game speak. You know, and he's one of the few people who didn't call Ronnie Lott Ronnie. It was a young Ron Lott. It's those type of things. So it's like when you're listening to Vin Scully, it's just a soothing voice. That transistor radio under the pillow. There's just certain things that it's hard to put it into words because only those people can truly put those feelings into words. I wouldn't even try to. Chris is really good at putting his thoughts into words. I aspire to be at Chris's level. I don't even consider getting to Vin Scully level or to Keith Jackson level. Can't even fathom that.
Chris, would you do me a favor after the show's over? Could you give an autograph to Mark?
Please.
Please. Best wishes to Mark.
Well, don't give Mark a hard time like that. You're just going to encourage him to attack me like he was doing last week.
Mark,
this week we're getting along.
I'm very Machiavellian, so you gotta watch out.
Oh, kumbaya! Let's get into it. Let's just Michael roll your boat ashore. So, Chris, who is your top 2 in order broadcasters on TV?
I'm not going to give you 2. I'm only going to give you 1, and it's the one that we already talked about. And I'll tell you why. Because the gap between Keith Jackson and everybody else is so large that it almost doesn't make sense to talk about a second. And I'll tell you why I think Keith Jackson is great. It's not just that he was smooth and he always understood what was going on the field, because there are other people who can do that, right? ESPN has guys who can talk and talk effectively. But number one, Keith Jackson loved college football, right? You could tell he loved it. There was no place. You listen to Keith Jackson call a USC UCLA game at the Rose Bowl, and you could tell there is no place in the world Keith Jackson would rather be than at that spot. And you could probably have docked him his pay that game, and he still would have shown up and done it. So that was part of it. Keith Jackson loved college football, and Keith Jackson made you love college football. The other thing is that Keith Jackson really understood the tradition of college football. And he always had great anecdotes. He wove together the past and the present in a way that very few can. And ultimately, Keith Jackson not only understands the tradition of college football, but he becomes a big part of it, right? Because after you've been there so long and you've had so many important calls, you become a part of that tradition in a way that Vin Scully and Chick Hearn and very few people do, right? But these are guys who, when you listen to a Keith Jackson or a Chick Hearn or a Vin Scully, and you're not just watching that game, you're watching the last 30, 40 years of that game. You're learning about what that game is about and the people that came before, and so he ties that game into a lot of other things. And I remember listening to Keith Jackson growing up when I was a kid, and every time you'd listen to him, you were learning about the past. You understood college football tradition in a way that you may not have if you had a different announcer, and you were listening to somebody who loved that game about as much as you did. And he was the best. So I'm only going to talk about Keith Jackson, and I don't think there'll ever be another.
Well, I will tell you, first of all, Keith Jackson understood Southern football because he grew up in Georgia, right? That's where he was from. He also understood West Coast football because he went to Washington State.
Right.
I believe that Keith Jackson's daughter went to USC. So he had a little bit of the country everywhere, and he had credibility. Whoa Nelly and all some of the other things he did were good. But unlike Chris, I'm not going to cop out and say he's so good that I can't think of any others. And Chris's response is, well, you're so freaking old. I'd be disappointed if you didn't bring up somebody from 1910. But
was there TV? Was there college football on TV in 1910, Greg?
So they tell me.
Mark and I don't know. We weren't there.
Okay, I'm going to come up with actually two names that people that are older are going to know. One was Lindsey Nelson. Lindsey Nelson used to do the replays of Notre Dame games that were actually shown on the West Coast. We moved to further action in the second quarter, and he was from Tennessee, so he had a Southern type of draw. Also was the voice of the New York Mets for a while, but he was very good and had a lot of credibility. He used to team up with Paul Hornung, the great Green Bay Packer halfback who was a Heisman Trophy winner at Notre Dame. And another one I'll bring up because I think he was more of a symbol. I'm not saying he was great, was a guy named Chris Schenkel. And Chris Schenkel used to team up with Bud Wilkinson, the legendary Oklahoma coach. And they called games in the 60s. In fact, they called the famous 1967 USC UCLA game, in which if you watch on YouTube, they're the broadcaster. And Chris Schenkel, a little bit hokey in the sense that I thought he tried to be a little over dramatic, but he was the voice of college football during that time period. And then after Schenkel was there, and then kind of Keith Jackson kind of moved in at that standpoint. But all three of them in their era were very well. I think the one thing I missed, since we're talking about broadcasters a little bit, in the old days, in the 60s and very early 70s, they used to announce the players, the starting offense or defense. The players would come on the field and they'd line up, the 11 guys on offense, let's say, and a guy named Bill Fleming would announce it to the nation, and they would pipe it into the stadium. and he would say from at left end from, from Coos Bay, Oregon or whatever. And you'd see these guys and, they're just chomping at the bit, especially when it was SC Notre Dame. You could see the intensity in their eyes because they'd zoom right up. And then some of these guys started saying, you know what, I'm going to start flashing a few signs. So we got the peace sign, we got the fist, and I remember that McKay one year decided to do his seniors, which was good, but it was always fun when they would do that around the country because you could really sense like Ohio State and Michigan, and you'd look at the players and they'd be introduced, and the two lines were very close to each other. And all Fleming would do is he'd say, and the head coach of Ohio State, Woody Hayes. And then it's almost like he just turned to his left and there was the Michigan team. So I kind of miss that where they go down on the field and they show it. So, time flies, but if you look at some old YouTube broadcasts, you'll see those introductions for USC in the early 70s, late 60s. It actually was kind of cool. So, all right, before we get to the second half, a reminder that you're watching or listening to WeAreSC.com's Inside the Trojans Huddle. This week's panelists include Marc Kulkin, Chris Arledge, and I'm Greg Katz. We also encourage you to check out WeAreSC.com's website, part of the On3 network. Become a subscriber to the best coverage of USC football and recruiting with Scott Schrader and overall Trojans athletics. And as a reminder, WeAreSC is currently offering a WeAreSC 7-day free trial, which includes future monthly or yearly payments options to view our exclusive On3 Plus content, which includes breaking stories, analysis, recruiting, data for USC football, basketball, and the balance of USC athletics. All right, let's begin the second half and the third quarter. On a recent On3 Hard Count podcast led by On3 columnist Ivan Maisel, he said the following in regards to the USC football program. If you look at what they were to what we expect them to be, I think it'll be a couple of years. If you look at what they were the last 4 years when they were 22 and 21, I think they'll be a lot better. The talent upgrade has been significant. I still have questions about whether they're going to be able to block somebody to keep all that offensive skill players upright, but they'll be better. It's just, I think, to be great, it'll take a couple of years. Panel, do you agree or disagree with Ivan Maisel's analysis that it's going to take 2 years? What do you think? 3 years? Mark, how long is it going to take before SC could be considered great?
To be great, 2 years, but I think his concern is on the wrong side of the ball. I think the offensive line this year is going to be just fine. Caleb Williams makes up for anything they lack with his, escapability, mobility, however you want to, characterize it. You got plenty of skill position to back that up as well. So Ivan Maisel is right. It's going to take a couple of years for the program to return to greatness as we know it. I don't know where you want to compare that to, the John McKay era, the Pete Carroll era. Greatness is winning championships. I think that's we can say that's the case. So it's on the defensive side of the ball. I don't think it's going to take a couple of years for the offense to be great.
Do you see, based on the recruiting at this point, that the questions you have on defense are, do you see enough progress recruiting wise that by the time SC gets to the Big Ten in 2024, that they're on the road to being great?
I think you got to convince me first that the scheme is the right scheme to use. Eric and I were talking about this at practice yesterday. As far as the defensive line, the word we used was it's worrisome. There's potential, but when you look over there, you don't see any Jordan Davis type of bodies. The closest you see to that is a Brandon Peely, and even he has trimmed down in a good way. He looks much more athletic for a guy his size. And so back to the scheme, if they want people who are quicker and more athletic, does that translate to when they get to the Big Ten where it tends to be more of a more physical plodding type of conference. So
You mentioned the name Jordan Davis, I
from
think.
Georgia,
Yeah,
with
okay.
the Philadelphia
Some of our listeners might not know who he
Yeah.
is.
he played for Georgia last year. Now he's dominating as a rookie with the Eagles.
Okay.
And he just doesn't have that type of body right now on their defensive line. And Brandon Peely would be the closest to it. And he's nowhere close to a Jordan Davis.
Chris, what did you think of that article, Maisel? Just, I don't know if you actually read the whole thing, but how far away is SC from being great? I think we could agree they're not great at this moment, but how long is it going to take?
I think he's right on the time frame. I agree with Mark. I don't, when he says I'm not sure they're gonna be able to block anybody, I don't know if they'll be able to keep the skill players standing up. That's just because Maisel has to follow 120 teams and he doesn't really know what's going on at USC. USC is not going to have any trouble keeping their skill players upright. They're going to score a ton of points this year, a ton of points. They're going to have a better offense than Georgia. They're going to have an offense that's comparable to Ohio State's. I mean, that's what they're going to do. That's not the issue. The issue is on the other side of the ball. Now, are they going to be good enough defensively this year to win the Pac-12? Yeah, I don't know that they will. I mean, they have to play Utah at Utah, but are they going to be good enough on that side of the ball? I suspect they will, but they're pretty thin. And so if you get some injuries, if you lose Thule, then you've got problems.
Yeah.
But I think they're going to be with the combination of the offense and the first line talent. If they avoid serious injuries, they're going to be good enough that they can win the conference. If you win the conference, you've got a shot at the playoff. Can they beat a team like Alabama in the playoff? No, I don't think they can be competitive with them, frankly. And that'll take a few years. In terms of this scheme issue that Mark talked about, look, I'm torn. I mean, look, most teams don't have a Jordan Davis, right? That guy was a freak, and they don't come around very often. I don't think Alabama has a Jordan Davis right now, but they have some big bodies that can move. I don't have a problem with a philosophy of being very quick and very attacking up front. I think you can get away with that. You can get away with that against running teams. Remember some years ago when Hercules, whatever his name was at Washington State, was blowing up every running play in the backfield. The guy was tiny, but he was so quick, and they just unleashed him to fly through the gaps. Keep in mind that what USC is going to be under Lincoln Riley is one of the top 2 or 3 offenses in the country, and an offense that can score anytime from anywhere on the field. All right. What that means is it puts immense pressure on the other offense. And you don't have to consistently stop the other offense with an offense like that. What you have to do is you have to attack them. Because a sack that ends a drive can make the game 14-0 right away, right? You get you're aggressive up front going after the passer, you're jumping passes in the defensive backfield. An interception turns a game that's 14-10 into a 21-10 game, and now all of a sudden you're in trouble. That's what having a great, very high-powered offense can do for you. You can play very aggressively defensively, and that means that you can take risks. You can afford to give up some plays because you can take some risks. I think that's what Lincoln Riley's going to do, and I think it can work. But if it's going to work, he's got to recruit guys up front who can be disruptive. And I don't care if they're 340 pounds or if they're 285. A guy who's quick. I mean, Aaron Donald's not a big guy, right? Aaron Donald is probably the best interior lineman that's ever lived. He's 285 pounds? He's not 340. But he's unblockable. So I'm not as bothered. I'm not as bothered by the lack of size as Mark is. But you need to go too deep, and you need to unleash people, and you need to have guys that are great hand fighters. You need to have a scheme that allows people to get through the gaps. Are they going to have that kind of defense this year? No, they're not going to have that kind of defense this year. But in a couple of years, they might. And if they do, then they can win it all. This year, the goal is to win the Pac-12, which will be tough, but is doable.
Well, I tell you, I think my original thing was a couple of years, but with the Big Ten in 2024, I've reevaluated what I think they're going to be able, to have to do. If they had stayed in the Pac-12, I think that 2 years would be sufficient to start dominating the Pac-12, but they're not going to do that when they hit the Big Ten. There's just better talent with the better teams. I'm really concerned, not that they're going to, I mean, they're going to win. They're going to win. They're going to have a winning record. I don't think that this year, 8-4 would be bland to me. 9-3 would be more acceptable. 10-2 is what I'm looking at right now. But then the following year in 2023, which is, we talk about being 2 years away or what have you, that offensive line is going to have to be replaced. And it's also your last year of Caleb Williams. So when 2024 rolls around, is the recruiting class of 2023 going to have those interior players that you guys have talked about from a recruiting standpoint? I'm not going to rely on the transfer portal for every time that you got to get linemen. But are they going to be ready to compete at a high level at 2024 in the Big Ten? Because I think winning the Big Ten is going to be a lot more difficult than winning the Pac-12 when it all shakes out. So I think that maybe they're 4 years, 3 years at least from being great. And there's a difference between being good and being great. Being great means you can compete with Ohio State. Okay. I have no idea what's going to happen with Michigan. I have no idea whether Harbaugh is going to be there or whether they're going to, be able to sustain what they did last year. I don't know if they can do that. But for where I think we all need SC to go and even win a Big Ten championship game, they have to be great. Although the playoffs will be an expanded playoffs maybe by 2024, where it's 12 or 16 teams. So if the goal is to get into the playoffs, I think they'll stand a better chance. But I think I think it's gonna be 3 years for them to do it. They'll have a new quarterback too, if Malachi Nelson. So we'll see.
Greg, can I jump in here?
Chris.
I think you're overrating the Big Ten. Ohio State is a great football program, but other than Ohio State, who's great in the Big Ten? Michigan's not great. Wisconsin's not great. Penn State's not great. Iowa's not great. Those are good football programs. USC can be at Ohio State's level in a couple of years. And I'll tell you why. They're going to be at Ohio State's level offensively this year. And there's no reason they can't continue to do that. Defensively, they have a ways to go. But and you're right, you cannot count on the transfer portal to build your offensive and defensive lines completely. You cannot. Do you know what you can count on it? You can count on to deliver you 1 or 2 superstar defensive linemen that excelled at a lower level and want to try a shot at a bigger program. You can find a couple of those guys every year through the transfer portal, and that means you can supplement. So look, the Big Ten has more good football teams than the Pac-12, and not a single one of them can stop Ohio State from scoring 45 points a game. They can't. They haven't been able to do it at all. I mean, Michigan finally beat Ohio State, but Ohio State runs roughshod through that conference just about every year because nobody can stop Ohio State from scoring on every freaking drive. USC is going to do the same thing to the Big Ten that Ohio State is doing. And it's simply a matter of beefing up the front seven in order to go from being a good team to a great team. There's no reason it takes more than 2 years to do that. You bring in 2 top-notch defensive line recruits next year, and that makes a huge difference in your roster for USC. So I don't think it's that tough. The Big Ten is a much better football conference than the Pac-12, and Ohio State has been a significant cut above everybody in that conference because they're so much better athletically. Their scheme offensively is so much better. USC will do the same thing, and it's not going to take 4 years.
Mark, you need to get in on this. Dogpile on me.
I that's what I didn't want to do is I didn't want to.
No, I want you to do that.
I didn't want to dogpile on you, Greg. Look, that transfer portal is the great equalizer, period. And NIL is another, factor in this whole thing. Chris wrote a great story on NIL. after he had a chance to revisit with Spencer Harris. Once USC is up and running, our concern with where USC is getting beat in recruiting right now, in the trenches, will be alleviated once USC gets that, NIL program up and running. But until then, you're going to use the transfer portal. You're going to rely on your previous recruiting classes being developed by Josh Henson. You're already hearing some names that both Henson and Lincoln Riley has mentioned. Gino Quinones, Andrew Milek, Jason Rodriguez, obviously he goes back further. But you got guys in the system that you want to continue to develop. You fill in the holes through the portal, and you continue to recruit at a high level, and hopefully use some NIL to kind of back it up. So yeah, Lincoln Riley doesn't have that 3 to 4 year period anymore. That time frame doesn't exist. You get a 1 year honeymoon, and then you're expected to win the following year. And he's got an advantage. He's got the transfer portal to fill in the holes.
Well, I will tell you why I'm right. And that's because you have to take into consideration that there will be no Caleb Williams at quarterback in 2024. You're basically saying that SC will be great in 2024 with a unproven freshman quarterback or redshirt freshman or sophomore quarterback in Malachi Nelson.
Matt Leinart said, hold my beer.
Okay, I'm just saying, you're saying that they're going to be great, and you're going to say they're going to be great.
I'm saying quarterback is going to be the least of my concern with Lincoln Riley as a head coach. That's I can't say to any player.
So you're saying that the experience factor doesn't affect it at all?
Well, that's overstating it, Greg, but the days when it takes a quarterback 3 years to figure out how to play college football are over.
Yeah.
I mean, the passing offenses in high school and in the 7-on-7s and with the quarterback coaching these guys get now, guys come in ready to play, and you see it all over the place where you have guys in their first or second year and they're turning it up. And I'll tell you this, if Lincoln Riley's going into 2024 and all he has is a guy who he doesn't think is ready to be the starter at quarterback, I can guarantee you USC will have a transfer quarterback that year. But Lincoln Riley is not going to go into the season with a guy who can't execute the offense and say, well, maybe in 3 years he'll have some experience. That's what Katz says we need. No, he's not going to do that.
Now you're asking for it. Now that
you're showing Miller Moss a whole
now that
lot
you
of
made it
disrespect.
personal, you had to say Katz. So now I must retort to your dissertation. First of all, there is no substitute for experience when you're getting chased by bad people with bad intentions. We don't know how Malachi Nelson will respond to that. We don't know how Malachi Nelson's going to respond to stadiums that are much different than the Pac-12 stadiums. I think whether you're Michigan or even Iowa, those fans present a whole different distraction. I want to agree with you. I don't disagree.
No, you don't. No, you don't. You just
yes,
want to be
I do. Don't do that. You're out of
the
order.
fans out in cyberspace know what you're like, Greg. They know what you're like. They know you're being difficult. Well, you know what?
You're worried about you know what you're worried about? How are the people on YouTube commentary going to sit there, and how's it going to play? That you live your whole life.
You know what? Okay, people in YouTube, let Greg know what you think about this commentary. I want you to let him have it. I'm tired of this nonsense. Lincoln Riley always has a quarterback, and that quarterback is going to have Rayleigh Brown and Zachariah Branch and a bunch of other guys that can play. They're going to be all right offensively with Lincoln Riley. They're going to be. And if he doesn't think that Miller Moss can do it, if he doesn't think that Malachi Nelson is ready, then he'll bring in a 1 year stopgap from somewhere that has seen these big stadiums that you're talking about. That's what he'll do. It's a new day. You have the transfer portal.
Greg, I didn't really feel your heart.
Okay, now here we go. Okay, now that Chris has jumped on, Marco, this is going to be good.
I didn't feel your heart in this one, Greg. I think you dug your heels in just to play devil's advocate, and you should probably just step away from this one.
Yeah, he's just being difficult. That's what I said. He's just being difficult.
Quarterback, before Lincoln Riley, quarterback has never been a problem at USC. And if Lincoln Riley can turn Baker Mayfield into a good quarterback in college, he can turn chopped liver into something edible.
You know, it always gets back to food with you. I noticed that. Chopped liver. I think
I don't like
I know
chopped,
why.
and I don't
Chopped
like
liver,
chopped.
that's not food.
Disgusting.
Yeah.
Chopped liver is disgusting.
Yeah, that's not-
something I thought you would thoroughly enjoy.
Well, no, I remember my grandmother used to make it. I thought I was going to gag. Bottom line is, I hope you're right. There's a difference to me between being very good and being great. If they can be great in 2024, nobody will be happier than me. And yes, I agree. Ask Spencer Rattler if Lincoln Riley is willing to change quarterbacks if he thinks it's not being done. I totally agree with that. The question is can they be great and could they win a national championship? You know, the beauty of it, and I think you'll agree with this, we know what a national championship team looks like because nobody's done it better than USC. 11 national championships. I have seen most of them and I know what they look like. It doesn't make any difference what era they are at. They all have the same type of cloth. You know, the beauty of this now is that we get to transition to a very special moment. Now that I've gotten Chris all warmed up, it's that time that we begin the fourth quarter huddle with the traditional, and here it comes. You've been waiting for it. The lighting of the Chris Arledge Coliseum torch. Look at that.
Eric and I did see a replica plastic torch at the Coliseum.
Really?
Whoa, really? We could get the real deal?
Hey,
We're looking into it.
I'm a bachelor. We could put it right in my living room with
I'm
all
very
the
excited.
memorabilia.
Keep your
All right.
personal life out of this, Greg.
Okay. Now,
All right.
folks, we must do this from a legal standpoint. A reminder, any comments or opinions expressed by Chris Arledge are solely those of his own, and are not in any shape or form a reflection of the opinions of WeAreSC or the On3 network. Any republication, rebroadcast, use, or description of Musings with Arledge without the express written consent of the Gentlemen Clubs of America and the Oregon Ducks Athletic Department is strictly prohibited. So now, ladies and gentlemen, I know that you've all been waiting for this. It's time for Inside the Huddle's version of Christopher Arledge's Musings with Arledge. Chris?
It's great to know that two of the classiest organizations in America are in charge of my content now. The Oregon Athletic Department and the Gentlemen Clubs of America. John Lennon saying instant karma is going to get you. Sometimes it does. Sometimes, though, karma doles out its punishments a little more slowly. Sometimes you get a bit of both. We're going to talk today about hubris and karma. USC football is back on the upswing. Lincoln Riley will succeed at USC. Greg Katz doesn't think so. Greg Katz doesn't think that Lincoln Riley will have a quarterback. He's afraid of the big stadiums at Iowa. But the rest of us know that USC football is on the way back. Now, does that mean that he's going to succeed the way Pete Carroll did? I don't think we know that. But he's going to win some games. And when he wins a lot of games, and when he does that, when he starts to turn the program around, we have to be very careful. Because hubris, if you remember from your high school English class, fatal pride is lurking just around the corner. And if it does, our downfall will be painful. They take you back to November of 1998. The final play in a UCLA blowout of USC, Kade Mcdown, a villain, I think we can all agree, takes the snap. And instead of simply taking a knee, he fakes a pitch and runs a completely unnecessary bootleg to end the game. He then throws the ball up in the air and the Bruins celebrate. They've now won 8 straight against USC. Kade Mcdown's the only quarterback in the series to win 4 straight games in the rivalry as a starter. The Bruins are 10-0. They only need to win one more game against an unranked opponent to book their spot in the national title game. Now, the ancient Greeks invented hubris to refer to defiance of the gods or defiance of the natural order. UCLA winning 8 straight games against USC, headed for a national title game. What could be more in defiance of the natural order than that? And I believe it was that last act of hubris, that unnecessary bootleg, that effort to drive in the shank just one more inch That was more than the football gods could stand. The Bruins would now be punished. Nobody knew it then, but UCLA was about to suffer the curse of Kade's bootleg. The next week, UCLA blew a 17-point fourth quarter lead to lose at Miami and fall out of the national title game. Karma was swift, but it wasn't finished. UCLA then lost the Rose Bowl to Wisconsin. They haven't been back since. Since Kade's bootleg, UCLA is 146 and 138 overall. That's a quarter century of suck. At the time of Kade's bootleg, the Bruins had already clinched the conference title and a Rose Bowl berth. That would be their sixth in 24 years. In the 23 years since Kade's bootleg, zero. No conference titles. 10 losing seasons in 23 years. Only 3 times have they actually finished a season ranked. Oregon State's done it 5 times in that same stretch. The Bruins have won 6 of 23 against USC since Kade's bootleg. Since that bootleg, UCLA has provided almost a quarter century of dumpster fire. Their program is being punished for its sins. It is now an embarrassment. Karma got them and hasn't let go. But not just them. On December 12, 2004, Notre Dame hired Charlie Weis to be its head coach. Weis was the offensive coordinator of the New England Patriots at the time, and Charlie believed, and Notre Dame fans believed, that it was Charlie Weis that made Tom Brady great. Under his leadership, he boasted that Notre Dame would always have a decided schematic advantage. He bragged that he never lost to Pete Carroll in the NFL, and he wasn't about to start now. And 10 months later, Charlie looked like he may just be the genius that Notre Dame fans thought he was. They believed even when they saw him on the sideline, allowing snot to flow down into his mouth. The single most disgusting thing I've ever seen while watching football. I would rather watch that Theismann leg break over and over again than look at a close-up of Charlie Weis's face on the sideline. But despite that, despite Notre Dame fans seeing that guy looking like Jabba the Hutt, they still believed that they had found their savior. And they would need one that October afternoon because USC came into the Notre Dame game ranked number 1 with a 27-game winning streak, 2 straight national titles. USC was a rock band of a football team. Paparazzi followed them. Hollywood starlets roamed the sidelines. The Trojans were in trouble, down 31-28 with 1:32 left in the game. USC was staring at a 4th and 9 in the loudest stadium I have ever experienced. And you all know what happened. That's when karma started to destroy Charlie Weis for his hubris. Liner completed the fade to Dwayne Jarrett, but the Irish still weren't dead. They still thought they were going to win. They rushed the field thinking they had won. They hadn't. The referees took all of those criminals and moved them off of the field to the sideline. And thousands stood there as Reggie pushed Matt into the end zone. Now, Charlie still went 10-3 that year and 10-3 the next because karma was upset. It was plotting, but it was not yet vengeful. So Charlie Weis did the worst thing possible. He used his reputation, unearned, of course, as a genius to land the nation's most sought-after quarterback, Jimmy Clausen. Clausen announced his decision at the College Football Hall of Fame, stepping out of a limo with his hand covered in CIF championship rings, like some sort of younger, less talented, and less masculine Liberace. The combination of Weis and Clausen was too much. They broke the hubris meter, and the fates destroyed them. The Irish went 3-9, 7-6, and 6-6 over the next 3 years. They never came close to competing with USC. Each year, the Notre Dame USC game looked like a scrimmage between a high school varsity team and a squad of disabled third graders who had never before seen a football. Karma got the Irish, and it got them good. Now, time is short. We don't have time today to talk about the hubris of the Oregon Ducks, who thought that changing clothes every week could hide their identity from karma, and who will soon be playing in the Mountain West, or the Stanford Cardinal of the What's Your Deal fame, or many, many others. Now, what's the moral of these stories, ladies and gentlemen? That bad things will happen to bad people if you wait long enough? Maybe. I wish that's what it meant, but I don't think that's all of it. The moral is that if you let hubris infect your program, karma will get you. We must be careful. So why does Greg continue to talk about and pump up the Rice Owls? Is it because Greg knows nothing about football and he's embarrassing himself in his ignorance? No, good people, that's not it. It's because all of us know the dangers of hubris. We know that karma can get us if we're not careful, and we're looking to avoid disaster. Things are turning around for USC football. All of us know that except Greg. It's now time that we must all be at our most careful.
Well, thank you, Chris. That was very uplifting for me personally. I think one of the redeeming values of that particular dissertation was that Mark went to his computer while you were talking and actually looking up what hubris means. It's amazing that what you can
Hubris, Mark. If you misspell it, you're not going to find it.
That's right.
I'm
In
stuck
fact,
on the-
I think for the younger crowd here that watch, you should bring up a word every week that's a new word that Mark can increase his vocabulary. I think that
We
would
could
be
do like a Sesame Street thing,
we
like
could
where we
do it.
have
That's right. That's right.
a word of the week, a number of the
Exactly.
week.
Look, before we go down this road, let me warn you.
Okay,
My
here we go.
my English teacher in 8th grade tried this. And she said, the word of the day was wanton. And she said, please use this in a sentence. And Mrs. Wagner was a wanton woman that day. Mark was in the principal's office 10 minutes later. So my vocabulary is just fine. It's, be careful how I use it.
All right.
Well, I know that was inspiring for me. Chris, did you find that inspiring, that story?
Not really.
The hubris of it all.
There you go. I thought you were actually being salubriously malfeasant, but who can argue on it? So with that, let's head on into the fourth quarter. Over the weekend, Friendswood, Texas, edge rusher Braylon Shelby committed to the Trojans over Texas. Shelby is the fourth player from Texas to commit to USC for the class of 2023. The Trojans now have 8 players committed from outside of California. Of the current 15 players committed, 7 are from California. Panel, what message is being sent by Lincoln Riley and his staff regarding out-of-state and in-state recruiting? Mark, I know that you follow it very strongly. So what is your, at the moment where we're at, obviously there's still people that are going to commit. How do you see the overall balance of in-state to out-of-state players? Does it matter? What's your take on it?
I think Lincoln Riley is going where he has to go. Something that people need to remember, California, and this was a story that just came out recently. California has seen high school football, their population drop year after year after year. So the pool of talent is getting smaller. So yeah, you have to go to Texas to get the type of bodies that we've been talking about on the show. If they want to be great in 2024, everything kind of goes in cycles as far as recruiting goes regardless. So in 2023, there's not a lot of big bodies out there. There's a few of them. 2024 tends to be a little bit better. I know Mater Dei's got a few guys that USC is looking at on the offensive line specifically. So I don't think it matters anymore, especially with USC moving to the Big Ten. I think that whole paradigm shifts to USC is more of a national player when it comes to recruiting anyways, and they're going to have to focus there for certain type of players. California will always be first and foremost. You get who you can, but you're going to have to go out of state to get the bigger guys. Is what it is.
Is that what it is, Chris Arledge?
Yeah.
What's your view? Now, you're just so fans know, you grew up in Southern California. Okay, your dad went to Fountain Valley High School, was one of the stars for Bruce Pickford's team in that era. Okay, now
He's gonna love that. He's gonna love that you said that.
Well, I did that for you because I figured he probably watches the show and critiques it every week. But the point is that you played for, was it Elsinore?
Lake Elsinore High School Tigers, baby.
Okay, there you go. There you go. But now you're living in Dallas, Texas, so you're very familiar with football in the state of Texas. So what is your view about this in-state, out-of-state balance, if there needs to be?
No, I don't think look, USC is going to have to recruit well in California, and I'm sure they will. We know that when USC is playing well, most players in California want to go to USC. And so he's going to have his pick of the litter there. But if Lincoln Riley grew up in Texas, he coached at OU. If you coach at OU, you are used to recruiting Texas and you have great connections in Texas. So it's actually a nice position to be in, because if you can pull the best out of California and the best out of Texas, you're going to be in a good spot. So he's going to go where the players are. And there's enough excitement around USC right now because they got Lincoln Riley that the kids are going to be interested. And if USC starts winning 11 games a year and going to the playoff, they're going to be able to go wherever they want in the country and pick out the best talent, the way Alabama has been for some years, the way Pete Carroll did. Carroll primarily recruited California, but he would go wherever he needed to go. He would steal a Fred Davis out of Ohio. He would steal a Keith. Why am I blanking on from Keith Rivers from Florida? I mean, he'd go where the players are, and Lincoln Riley's going to do the same. Mark also touched on another good point. It used to be that if you would try to recruit out of state, if you struck out, that's a problem. But even if you landed the guy, if you land a top 3 running back out of state and you skip over a top 10 running back in California, he'd go to Oregon or UCLA or someplace like that and really do you harm. I think with USC going to the Big Ten, that's going to be less the case, right? You can afford to lose guys who are going to be really good players to Oregon or Stanford, and they're not necessarily going to come back and cause you problems every year for the next 4 years. So I think that changes things a little bit also.
Well, I tell you what, I think Mark brought up a good point. The demographics of body types in California is a little different. There was a time when I think you could pretty much rely on getting players from the state, throughout the modern history of USC football. And I think Chris brought up an excellent point about this idea that Lincoln Riley can go into Texas. It's just that he's not selling Oklahoma, he's selling USC, which I think is probably, with all due respect to our Sooner fans, selling Southern California is a lot easier to sell with a good coach than maybe spending your 4 years in Norman, Oklahoma. And that's not being disrespectful to the Sooners. They have a great football legacy. But I think that I'm not so concerned about where that they get them from, is that they get them. So I know that football has changed recruiting wise in a lot of ways. Lincoln Riley can recruit nationally and go for it. Like you brought up, Keith Rivers was from, St. Mary's, Florida, Mike Williams, Tampa, Florida. So
Kyle Moore from Georgia.
Good point. SC's had a history actually of, if you live long enough, they've had actually a good history of getting players out of Georgia. Chip Banks, for those of you older enough, August Curley was another one. Walter Underwood earlier. Some of these names I know are not familiar to a lot of fans, but those of us that are a little gray hair on top, we remember some of these players. So getting players, I mean, even Clay Matthews was from New Trier, Illinois, of the great Matthews chain of events. So, SC is going to get players from wherever they can get them from. And certainly they're going to look at California first, because I think they want to do that because it's a built-in advantage. Mark, you wanted to say something? I can see.
Well, I was just gonna say I pulled it up. It was in the LA Times. I read it. Participation in high school football in California declines for the 6th consecutive season. 84,626 played football in 2021, down from 89,756 in 2019. That's a pretty precipitous drop. You keep that rate up, that talent pool is going to keep getting smaller. And I think that's part of that. Look, this is a whole nother rabbit hole, but there's a cultural thing that's going on in California. And USC joining the Big Ten is the best thing that can happen to them football-wise. They need to get away from the Pac-12 for a whole nother set of reasons, and we can talk about that on another show. But
and you know what? I think honestly, and being serious here, we are going to talk about another show because it warrants discussion that USC, if everything falls the way it is, players on the West Coast are going to have to decide, do I want to play in the Pac-12? Do I want to be in the Big Ten? How many times will my parents get to see? It's just going to open up I think, a wonderful conversation, and we're going to get to that. So appreciate you bringing that up. Let's get to overtime, gentlemen. Once again, it's time to answer some viewer questions for panel answers in a free-for-all format. Folks, if you'd like to submit a question that we can answer or give you our opinions, just go to either the Gary P. or WeAreSC members message boards at wearesc.com. From there, you'll see the topic thread regarding questions for Inside the Trojans Huddle. Let's get started here. Question 1 from MK87 in Honolulu, Hawaii. Aloha to you. And he writes, aside from Alani Noah, who's a prep lineman from Northern California, do we have a chance for additional offensive lineman commits for 2022? Example, Spencer Fano, Taliifi, Tea'ala, Marquise Deal, and TJ Shanahan. Any chance for DT, NT pickups for 2022? Mark, why don't you take this one? Because I know you're into the plugged in for the recruiting.
Yeah, there's definitely a chance. Are those names listed? I don't know. I don't think we're going to see any of those materialize, but yeah, there will be more. And there, in fact, players who are probably, I'd say players who are already committed to other programs, USC is still pursuing.
Absolutely.
I don't know if they'll get the Francis Mauigoas, but there are other offensive linemen that they were previously recruiting. They are still recruiting that are committed to other programs.
Yeah, I think what we want to do is we want to focus a little bit that MK87 brought up in Alani Noah. I think it's not if, I think it's just when he announces for USC. There's just so many reasons why he's involved in it. He likes the other two recruits that SC's bringing in. Banuelos, he likes that. And Talalele, he likes that. They really formed a future center guard thing for the Trojans. Really, it's going to be, if you're really looking for pickups, you really want to concentrate on offensive tackles in the future. I think Marcus Deal, is looking to stay in the Texas area, maybe TCU, from what I understand. So it's going to be interesting. Question 2 from USC Big. Does USC moving to the Big Ten cancel out future non-conference matchups? USC has a home and home scheduled with Ole Miss in 2026. Is it still on? The answer is
yes.
Yeah,
It's still on.
Yeah.
Still gonna have to play non-conference games.
Yeah.
And that's the point. Who are they going to have for non-conference games? Some of these have already been established. What's coming up in the future? I don't think that's going to be a problem.
We talked about this on a previous episode. Once these super conferences really start to cement themselves, strength of schedule is going to play a big part in the playoff picture. When you see Alabama scheduling up, that's the trend to follow. And Alabama is starting to schedule up out of conference. USC is always going to schedule up. They never schedule down out of conference. So yeah, their move is not going to be affected.
Yeah, I think one of the great disappointments I've had in the last 10 years for SC was the downsizing of their schedule, who they played. I guess I was weaned on, we play Oklahoma in the preseason. We face Ohio State, aside from Notre Dame, that we duck no one. Well, when SC is scheduling Cal Poly or UC Davis at some point, then I get really concerned. Why are we doing that?
His name is Clay. That's why.
I think that's the correct answer. Question 3 from David in Merced, California. I have concerns with the middle DT position. Do you guys think that either Kobe Pepe or Jamar Sakona have the potential to be solid contributors at defensive tackle? What say you? Mark, what do you think?
Oh, I was gonna let Chris go first on this one.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm not following those guys in practices. I mean, nobody gets to see most of the practices. I can't tell you. I will say, we talked about this before. There are a whole lot of question marks on that defensive line. There are, and that's why when we went through the group last week, we were as skeptical as we were. There is one great player, there is one very good player, there are some other guys that are talented that we think will turn into great players, and then there are a bunch of guys who haven't shown anything yet. Doesn't mean they won't, but it means they haven't. And so I'm not going to be the first one to go out and say that one of those two guys is going to be a great football player. I have no idea, but I'll say this: USC needs a lot more bodies there, and they need a lot more bodies from guys who you would expect to make a major impact. Lincoln Riley knows that, but that's what they're going to have to accomplish in recruiting the next couple seasons.
I appreciate the softball of the question, the way it was even phrased. It's like the potential to be solid contributors. I mean, that is as PC as it can get. So the answer is yes, they have the potential to be solid contributors. The real issue is, and we talked about it much earlier in the episode, the margin for error can fit between my thumb and forefinger right now. There's just no depth. So once you get past Tuli Tuipulotu and Nick Figueroa and a healthy Brandon Peely, and what everyone's hoping for is Solo is starting to open eyes in practice. The players are starting to talk about him. Can Jamar Sakona and Kobe Pepe be the guys? They have to be, because there's no one behind them. You know, another name to keep an eye on, maybe he slides into that role, Dejon Benton. I mentioned him the other day in my practice report. All of a sudden, the name pops up out of the coach's mouth after yesterday's practice. So, yeah.
The coaches are reading your stuff?
I don't know if they're reading my stuff, but they're seeing the same thing I'm seeing.
Oh.
Or they got the same gut I have.
I thought you were taking credit for opening their eyes. I thought that was bold of you.
I'm going to take credit for them putting I'm going to take credit for them putting music to Gavin on his Twitter. That's about it.
Only Mark could give you that type of insight. That's why you have to watch us, because Mark is always full of, I didn't know that.
Right.
I will say this: the question was phrased as potential, which is unproven talent, to be solid contributors at a specific position. I think Mark hit on a name there, Brandon Peely. I think he could really help if he's able to play, be in shape, and he could be that type of one-year player that finally gets it together. He knows if he's going to go to the NFL, he's got to show something this season. So he's definitely on the clock. So we'll see if he can do it. And Pepe, you know, I heard some comments he made about, you know, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And hopefully it happens for him. He's coming off some injuries in his career. So we'll see what happens when he's at full strength. Mark?
He's the closest thing to Mike Patterson that USC's had in a long time. I mean, exact same body shape. There's just, it's head, shoulders, torso, big legs. He's a Lego.
Wow, he's a Lego.
Well, if he's anywhere near Mike Patterson, then the answer to the question is yes.
Body style, yes. Have we seen him do it on the field? We don't know.
Mike Patterson, you can make an argument that Mike Patterson was the best interior defensive lineman at USC in the last 20 years. I mean, that guy was unbelievable.
Unbelievable. Absolutely.
Yeah. He was able to slither that big body between offensive linemen and just create chaos.
Yeah, just absolutely disruptive.
Yeah.
All right, question 4 from SC, the one in Orange County, or I assume it's Orange County, it's OC. Panel, which 2 SC offensive and 2 SC defensive players are you most looking forward to seeing play live? Who are your preferred SC punt returners and kickoff returners? Jump in, guys. Thoughts?
That's a lot of questions in one. SC.
All right, let's break down the 2.
All right, I'm going to choose the one I want to answer, and then I'm going to answer. All right, and I am most excited to see Rayleigh Brown play. And because I think just from watching the videos, from listening to what his high school coach, Bruce Rawlinson, had to say about him, I think the kid's going to be a superstar. I think a lot of people are sleeping on him as a running back because of his size. Barry Sanders was 5'6" and 160 pounds his senior year in high school. Rayleigh Brown's bigger than that. The truth is, it doesn't matter. It doesn't really matter how tall you are as a running back. As USC fans who watch Jacquizz Rodgers go off for a half and destroy a national title season should realize, it doesn't matter. That kid is quick as lightning. He is a natural pass catcher. He is going to be a weapon. I can't wait to see it. He's not going to be a full-time superstar this year as a freshman, because that just doesn't happen. Even Reggie wasn't that. But I think you'll see a lot of what you saw from Reggie his freshman year, which is you're going to see spot duty. He's going to run some pass routes out of the backfield. He's going to get some carries, especially outside. He's going to make a lot of people miss. He's going to be very exciting. I can't wait to watch it.
Mark, who are your 2 and 2?
Yeah, definitely Ray Leak on offense. There's nothing more to add to what Chris said there. You know, I'm gonna get hooked on him again. I want to see Josh Follow this year. If we're gonna have a tight end, and no offense to Jude Wolfe and Ethan Ray and everybody else at the position, but you know, Malcolm Epps. Josh Follow made another one of those highlight plays that we get once a year from him in practice, and that's all we get. He's a 6-year, 7th-year guy, depending on COVID, I don't know, but he's been around for a long time. So those would be the 2 guys on offense, because if you can add an athletic tight end to this offense with the wide receivers and the running backs and the Ray Brown, boom, that's just another weapon and tool that I don't care who's playing defense. You can't defend that many weapons. And Lincoln Riley knows how to get people open. He's a master of that. On defense, obviously, Solo is going to be my natural response. Want to see him get out there and just have one successful season. The other guy, I'm intrigued by Eric Gentry. Kalen Bullock, I think, is the easy answer, so I'm just going to bypass him. Eric Gentry. He looks like a tight end, the kind that Stanford rolls out.
He looks like a small forward.
Yeah, he's a perfect. Yeah, a power forward. So to play linebacker at that position, it's intriguing. I'm looking forward to seeing how they use him. You know, in pass coverage, if he's in the middle, that's going to make those throws, you know, that middle seam really difficult, especially if he's as athletic as he is. And then as far as punt kick returners, I think Jordan Addison's going to be the punt returner. I think that's going to be their Heisman buildup for him. And then Ray Brown on kick return. So, yeah, there you go.
All right, I'm going to say that I'm going to give it. Oh, really? That's really shocking. I'm going to go with Caleb Williams. I want to see if he can sustain the expectations for 12 games, especially as the games get really intense in the second half of the season at Utah, Notre Dame. If he is going to be in the Heisman race, those are going to be the games that he's going to have to shine. Also, I have a name, you know, I mean, the easy one would be see Jordan Addison for, you know, wide receiver, but I'm going to go with Travis Dye, because I think Travis Dye to me is really, really good. And I think that because there's this aura of Caleb Williams and the addition of Jordan Addison, you kind of lose fact this guy is really good. And, you know, he may not have the top end speed, but I think that he can get that 8 yards, 10 yards, 15-yard carry and move the chain. So that's who I see on offense. Defensively, I'm going to agree with Mark. I think Eric Gentry is really intriguing. Little concerned that he's underweight, okay, for the inside position for linebacker in this day and age of big linemen at 300. And I don't know how much pounding he can take on the inside, but I don't know if they're going to keep him on the inside. But, you know, we'll see about the defense they run. And I'm intrigued to see live Shane Lee. You know, what makes me intrigued about him is a lot of buildup. He's from Alabama, and he was a really well-known recruit coming out of high school. Had a good career for 1 year at Alabama. Then he got hurt, and, you know, you get hurt in Alabama. It's easy to see somebody take your place, and then you lose your spot. But I'll go with that. And I'll also go with kick returners and punters and punt return with Jordan Addison. I think that's kind of a no-brainer to me. And Ray Brown definitely has got to be in that mix there for that. So I think all the names we've gotten, you know, are going to deserve some exciting scrutiny. The last question will be from SC, the one. I know that the season is filled with ups and downs, but at the end of the day, if we can run it and pick up first downs when needed and stop the run, we will be in solid shape. My question is, if we are successful with the run, will it be scheme, newcomers, or improvement from the returners? What do you think, guys?
Well, we only have one returning running back, and that's Darwin Barlow. So I think we're going to have to it's going to have to come from the newcomers and the scheme. The offensive line, well, they return as well, so they're obviously a big part of this. Yeah, it's scheme. Graham Harrell, you heard the running backs talk about it after spring, and they didn't know what the hell they were doing. Now there's a running game. It's scheme. That's an easy answer for me.
Yeah, and defenses are going to have a very difficult time putting Nate in the box, right? Because there are too many weapons outside and too talented a quarterback and too sophisticated a passing attack. So it's the balance that's going to help us as well, because you can't put a bunch of guys in the box and then just hope that your guys can cover Jordan Addison, right? You just can't. So USC's running game is going to be solid, and part of that is going to be all of those factors. The other part is going to be that there are a whole lot of wide receivers and a really good quarterback that give defenses something to worry about. I'm
going to go with scheme, guys, because I think it's an opening for these offensive linemen to be able to pull. I think to myself, if Graham Harrell was the offensive coordinator, we would still not see a play action pass. And I think this play action pass, with the talent they've got on the skill level, is going to be a total nightmare for defenses. And I can tell you what, I can just see the people in the Coliseum all rising their feet as soon as Caleb Williams takes the ball and tucks it under and starts to run into the secondary. I think it's a no-win situation for defenses, and Lincoln Riley's going to know exactly how to do it. And it's going to be absolutely a joy to watch it. But I think the biggest change for me, aside from talent, is going to be that scheme. I think that scheme really, really is going to make this offensive line be even more productive than maybe even we realize it. So that's going to be a good thing to follow. So,
Chris,
yeah, Mark, go right ahead.
Chris, in your research, what was the play call on Kade McNown's naked bootleg? Because that is going to be the last play called by Lincoln Riley when USC travels to the Rose Bowl this year.
Well, it was they faked the toss sweep to Sean Foster, and then he ran a bootleg to the left-hand side, I think. So
we'll make sure that is the part of the arsenal this year.
Yeah, I'm in favor of that.
Of course, I will tell you my favorite Kade McNown moment
was puking.
Was objectively was the vomiting on the field. I think that was caught on Sports Illustrated. It was a showstopper, and he will be ever known to me as Vomit McNown. So with that, we will wrap things up here for this edition of Inside the Trojans Huddle. And a big thank you to this week's panel of the great Marc Kulkin, the great Chris Arledge, and a special big thank you to all of you who are watching or listening to Inside the Trojans Huddle. Until next Tuesday, this is your host, Greg Katz, reminding all of you to fight on, everybody.